Archiving started.
Buenos días, les quiero invitar a una presentación del 8.1 y 8.2 de la sección de estructura. We're going to start with 8.1, the preterite of the stem changing verbs. And if you'll remember back in lesson 6 when you learned about the preterite for the first time, we learned that the AR and ER verbs that were stem changers in the present tense don't stem change in the preterite. And when we talked about it then, I said to you guys, watch out because the IR verbs will stem change, and that's what we're going to work with today. The IR verbs that stem changed in the present tense will also stem change in the preterite, and we're going to see how that works in the next slide or two. The next slide I have for you is just a quick question to make sure you're with me. If you're watching this at home, please answer the question, and you'll get confirmation of the correct answer, and that helps you get credit for being here. The question asks which verbs have a stem change in the preterite, and then you'll select your choice and click Submit. Okay, hopefully that's enough time for you to work on that one and you got the answer correct. Let's see. Looking at the preterite of IR verbs, which were stem changers in the present tense, they'll still be stem changers in the preterite. And if you'll notice here, it doesn't show up very well on here, but the third person singular, your usted, él, ella, and your third person plural, ustedes, ellos, ellas, the second letter in each of their conjugations is supposed to be a darker black, and it looked really dark on my screen before we got it in here on Wimba. But these two here, the usted, él, ella, sirvió, durmió, and ustedes, ellos, ellas, sirvieron, durmieron, are the ones where you have a stem change, and we'll talk about what that is. Let's go through, and if you'll say these with me or repeat after me, that will help you catch the difference in the sound. The verbs that change from E to I or E to IE in the present tense, and the preterite, they'll just change from E to I. All of them will. And then the dormir is an example of a verb that changed from O to UE, and those verbs that changed from O to UE in the present tense will change from O to U in the preterite. Okay? And just remember that only IR verbs stem change in the preterite, and they change in the third person singular and the third person plural from E to I and from O to U. Let's go through these. Repiten, por favor. Serví, serviste, sirvió, servimos, sirvieron. And hopefully you can hear the difference between the A and the E sound that's being made. Let's go through it one more time. Serví, serviste, sirvió, servimos, sirvieron. Muy bien. And with the verb dormir, if you'll remember in the present tense, originally it was like duermo, duermes, duerme, dormimos, duermen. In the preterite, it's going to change from O to U in the third person singular and the third person plural. All right? Repiten, por favor. Dormí, dormiste, durmió, dormimos, durmieron. Listen again carefully as you repeat these, the difference between the O and the U sound. Dormí, dormiste, durmió, dormimos, durmieron. Dormí, dormiste, durmió, dormimos, durmieron. Muy bien. And essentially on this next slide, what we're going to be looking at is just confirmation of what we've already been talking about. Stem changing IR verbs and the preterite have a stem change in the third person singular and plural, which if you're not familiar with that terminology, third person singular is usted, él, and ella. And third person plural is ustedes, ellos, ellas. So whatever terminology you want to memorize so it'll make sense for you. Third person singular is usted, él, ella. And third person plural is ustedes, ellos, ellas. Some of my students I know memorize the subject pronouns in order, which is what you're supposed to do, and it helps them to remember it's the third one down and the last one that you're going to be changing. The third one, the first one's yo, the second one's tú, the third one is usted, él, ella, and then they remember the last one, ustedes, ellos, ellas, whatever works for you. I'm just wanting to make sure that you understand what we mean here when we refer to third person singular and plural. And the type of stem change that occurs is either from E to I or from O to U. And please note there's a huge flag waving here that is very different from the present tense. In the present tense, if you don't remember the present tense, you have access to it either on the Enlinea site or on it through your book, and you can find that in lessons 4 and 5, I think. Just check real quick so you'll know where to go back and look if you want to refresh your memory on the present tense stem changers. Yeah, lesson 4. If you've got the Vistas book, it would be pages 129 and page 133, and there's not anything extra on it on lesson 5. So 129 and 133 are the pages. And if you don't own a copy of the actual textbook, you can go into the Enlinea site and there's a place where you can put in the page you want it to jump to, and you can go back and refresh your memory on those. But anyway, basically a verb like pedir is an IR verb. It was a stem changer in the present tense. In the preterite, it's going to change from E to I. Now remember that in the preterite, the stem changing IR verbs only stem change third person singular and third person plural. So the forms that change would be pidió and pidieron. For a verb that was an O to UE stem changer, for example, morir, and in the preterite, it's going to change from O to U in the third person singular and third person plural, murió, murieron. Okay? For a verb like pedir, the yo form would just be the original. For me, it always helps to see all the different forms. The yo form would be pedí, the tu form would be pediste, and then of course the third person singular is pidió, and then for the nosotros form you would have, hang on just a second, pidió, and then for the nosotros you would have it without the stem change because it's only in the third person singular and plural. Let me see if I can get my cursor in the right place. Pedimos, and then, of course, the third person plural would be pidieron. Okay, so just so you can see, here again you've got third person singular and third person plural, the ones that are changing. And we have to do old school accent marks here. Please pardon the crudeness of my accent marks, but the shortcut keys don't work in this word processing program in the live classroom. So you've got pedí, pediste, pidió, pedimos, pidieron. And if you wish to look back in lesson 4, you'll see a list of other verbs that are stem changers, and you can note which ones were IR verbs so you'll know what they do in the preterite tense as well. Hopefully this is clear for you guys. This last slide is a little bit of practice similar to what's in your book. And we don't have anyone here with me today, so I'll do a few of them just to make sure we're on the right track. What they want you to do is they've given you a subject pronoun, for example, número uno, yo, y luego hay varios verbos aquí que son de IR, they're IR verbs, and they were all stem changers in the present tense. So remember, the rules are, for the preterite, only IR verbs stem change. They change from E to I and from O to U, only in the third person singular and the third person plural. So when you're presented with an exercise like this, one of the first things that may help to do is to look at the list of subject pronouns and decide which ones am I even going to have to stem change. The only ones you're going to have to stem change are number 2, número 4, y número 7, because those are the only ones referring to either third person singular or third person plural. So, for example, con número 1, we're just going to follow the regular rules of the preterite. Take off the IR and put your iste, io, imos, or ieron. In the case of this verb yo, E is going to be the ending that goes on every single one of these. So you'll have serví, dormí, pedí, preferí, repetí, seguí. And then you'll need to put your accent marks on these guys. These look funny to me, but it's just because I'm typing the same thing over and over again. But that's how that would work. With the usted form here, each of these is actually going to have a stem change because usted is third person singular. And the ending for an IR verb in the preterite is io. Okay, so you'll have, let me get my cursor in the right spot. For the first one, it'll be murió, consiguió. Oh wait, I got it. You can't see it yet, but I can see. It's like in a lighter font color before I hit enter. Pidió, sintió, se sintió, ¿verdad? Se sintió, se despidió, se vistió. Let me check my work before I make it appear. Murió, consiguió. No, I left that one out. Hang on. Oh, it's not going to let me fix it, I don't think. Yeah, it's not going to let me fix it. Can anyone find my mistake? Let me put my accent marks on. See if you can find my mistake. You've got murió, consiguió, pidió, sintió, se despidió, se vistió. And I had a typo. Can anyone find it? In one of them. It's one of the first 3, if that helps narrow it down. Not that anybody's going to be guessing. I'm here by myself. That sounds silly. But it's the second one. It should be consiguió. I should have changed the E to an I. And I don't know how to fix it right now. It won't let me unless I erase the entire slide, and we want to do that. So know that E goes away, and it's supposed to be an I. All right, and the rest of these would work the same way. Conseguiste, serviste. It's just the third person singular, like número 4 and número 7, and número 6 actually as well. My bad. That you would need to do any stem changing with. All right, and the stem changing is just from E to I or from O to U. And hopefully, if you do this practice and you do the other practice in the book, it will help solidify your understanding of it. It's one thing to memorize the rules. It's another thing to put it into practice. And it just takes a lot of repetition to be able to get these. All right, as you work through this, if you have any questions, please feel free to email me or post questions on the discussion board, and we can figure things out. The next thing that we're going to look at are the double object pronouns. And just the name double object pronouns can sound overwhelming because this refers to some grammar that, unless you were kind of a grammar fanatic or you've recently had a grammar course, it refers to parts of speech and grammar that you may not really know what they are in English. So as we go through this, I'm going to try to explain to you what it is in English, because if you don't know what it is in English, how on earth are you going to know what it is in Spanish? All right. Basically, double object pronouns are just when you have an indirect object pronoun and a direct object pronoun in the same sentence. That's all that refers to. Some of you may be wondering, well, hey, what's a direct object and what's an indirect object pronoun? And we're going to look at that and go through that as we go along. In lessons 5 and 6, you learned about direct and indirect object pronouns. For this course, lesson 6 you've had, and you learned about the may, te, lay, nos, and lace were your indirect object pronouns. In lesson 5, if you took Spanish 1 here, you should have gotten through lesson 5. Now, whether you did or not is a whole nother story, and whether you remember anything from it or not is a whole nother story. If you want to go back and refresh your memory, feel free. On page 174, there is the information about direct object nouns and pronouns. Essentially, a direct object is what receives the action of the verb, and it usually comes after the verb. So in a sentence like, I visit my mom is the direct object because who or what do I visit? My mom. Okay? And what we're going to be working with today are when you have a direct object and an indirect object together in the same sentence. And let's just look through at what the indirect object pronouns are and what the direct object pronouns are. Again, indirect object pronouns are may, te, lay, nos, and lace. And if you'll notice here, you see say in parentheses beside the lay and the lace. The reason why that's there, we're going to talk about it in just a few minutes, but just so you know right now, when you're using an indirect object pronoun and a direct object pronoun together in the same sentence, instead of using lay or lace, you're actually going to use the word say. Because if you look over here at your direct object pronouns, all of them start with the letter L. And there's an unspoken rule somewhere, actually it is written, but where you can't have two pronouns that start with L right next to each other. So remedy that, they make lay and lace turn into say. And if you remember your reflexive pronouns from last chapter, it's paying credence to that. The say was the third person singular and the third person plural of the reflexive pronouns. So that's probably fresh on your mind. The direct object pronouns are lo, la, los, and las. And let's just go through and look and see what happens here. When the direct object and indirect object pronouns are used together, the indirect object pronoun will always come before the direct object pronoun. Let me tell you how I remember that, because I'm not a native Spanish speaker and I had to learn Spanish too, so I can tell you my tricks that helped me when I was in school. If you can remember, like ID card, you have to show your ID or your ID card. I, indirect, D, direct object. Just remember ID, and that'll help you remember the order that they go in. Always indirect before direct. But let's look at a couple of these real quick. El camarero me muestra el menú. El camarero me lo muestra. The me is the me, to me. The lo is taking the place of the word el menú, and you can look at el menú and know that it's singular and masculine, so it's going to be replaced with the word lo. And again, your indirect object pronoun comes first, then the direct object pronoun. El camarero me lo muestra. And they come before the verb typically. All right? Nos sirven los platos. They serve us the dishes. Nos is still going to be nos. And los platos as a direct object noun can be replaced with the direct object pronoun los. Nos los sirven. Nos los sirven. And again, you've got the indirect, then the direct object pronoun. The next sentence that's here, Maribel te pidió una hamburguesa. Maribel te la pidió. The la is coming as a reference to una hamburguesa, a word, a noun that is singular and feminine. And again, in all three of these, please notice that first is the indirect object, then the direct object pronoun. Okay? The next thing I have for you is a quick question to help you get credit for being here. If you will answer this question, when used together, which comes first, the indirect object pronoun or the direct object pronoun? And you'll make your selection and click submit, and you will get confirmation of what the correct answer was. Okay, hopefully that was enough time for you. And we're going to move on in our discussion about double object pronouns. Essentially, this is what I was telling you guys earlier, that in Spanish, two pronouns that begin with the letter L cannot be used together. So lay and lace will become se when you use them with lo, los, la, and las. Okay, and here's a couple examples showing that. Le escribí la carta, so that you're not saying le la escribí, which even to an untrained ear, hopefully that would sound funny to you. The le has to change to se la escribí. Le sirvió los entremeses, so that you're not saying les los sirvió. The lace changes to se los sirvió. All right, and that's just to make it sound better, and also it is a rule, but even to someone who doesn't know a lot of Spanish, hopefully that would sound funny to have the two L words right next to each other. It would sound confusing. Okay, this is very similar to when we were using lay and lace with the gustar verbs in the last chapter. This is exactly the same idea. Say was referring to lay and lace, but we had to change it to say to avoid having the two words that start with L and right next to each other. Because we did that, say has lots of meanings. It can refer to a usted, a él, a ello, a ella, a ustedes, a ellos, a ellas. It can refer to anyone that's third person singular or third person plural. And in order to clarify, just like you did with the gustar verbs, you can put a whoever it is that you're actually referring to clarify who the say is referring to. For example, el sombrero, the hat. Carlos se lo vendió a ella. Carlos se lo vendió a ella. And you could do without the a ella here, but you wouldn't necessarily know who he sold it to, if it was to you, to him, or to her. But by clarifying with the a ella, we know specifically who the say was referring to. All right? Las verduras, ellos se las compran a usted. They buy them for you, ¿verdad? The vegetables, they buy them for you. Ellos se las compran a usted. Se las, and the se, we don't know who it's referring to, so you can put the a whoever. You could put a mi mamá, a Juan y Miguel, whoever it is that it happens to be referring to. Okay? Okay. The double object pronouns, this is talking about placement. Where are you going to put these crazy things? They're placed before a conjugated verb. Now, with your infinitive or your present participle, you can attach them to the end of the infinitive or the present participle. Again, we talked about this when we originally looked at the indirect object pronouns in Lesson 6. And why not keep it simple? Put it before the first conjugated verb, and you'll be set. You don't have anything extra to memorize or to have to remember. If, though, in real life, everybody else is going to be using it attached to it. So I want you to be aware of what that is. And if you want to try and attach it to it, knock yourself out, feel free. Know, too, that you'll have to add an accent mark to keep the stress on the original syllable. You're adding two syllables, so you've got to go and put the accent mark on it to maintain the original stress. So, for example, with this sentence, te lo voy a mostrar, I'm going to show it to you. Voy a mostrártelo. And you can either put the te lo before voy, or you can put it attached onto mostrar, mostrártelo. Another example, nos las están sirviendo, they're serving them to us, están sirviéndonoslas. And to me that just sounds crazy, but it is correct. It is correct, but I don't hear many people speaking that way. Están sirviéndonoslas. But it works. It follows the rules and it makes sense. But in real life, that one probably people wouldn't say. Let's see what's next. Okay, we've got some practice here. And this one says to fill in with the direct object pronoun. They've used the indirect object pronoun already on here. And if you'll remember what your direct object pronouns were, I'm just going to make a little list over here so you can see it and put all this together. Remember, they were lo, la, los, las are the choices. And basically what you need to do on exercises like this is look at the noun that is going to be replaced by the direct object pronoun. For example, this first one, la ensalada, and it's obviously singular and feminine, so you're going to have to put la in the blank. Nos la sirvió. Let me get this to show up real quick. Hang on just one second. Okay, there we go. Nos la sirvió. And then el salmón obviously is masculine and singular. La dueña me lo recomienda. La comida is feminine and singular, so voy a preparártela. La. Okay, and this is an example of one, like the last slide that we saw. You've got the verb preparar as the infinitive, and they're adding te la on the end of it. You could also put te la before voy. Te la voy a preparar, and that would work equally well. Las bebidas, estamos pidiéndose los refrescos, te los puedo traer ahora. Los platos de arroz van a servirnos los después. All right. Basically, if they're set up like this, it's very simple. You can look at the definite article, los, las, la, or el, and tell exactly which direct object pronoun you're supposed to be using. On the next slide, they want you to fill in with the indirect object pronoun. If you'll remember, the indirect object pronouns are, I don't know that you'll be able to see this because it may be on the margin. Me, te, le, or in this case, since we're using it together with a direct object pronoun, it'll be se. Nos and les, and because we're using it with a direct object pronoun we'll have to change it to se. So your choices are me, te, se, nos, and se. And basically what you're going to be doing is look at the subject or the verb that's referred to in the question. For example, in número es traerme tu plato. Okay, and here you've got to think a little bit about the indirect object pronoun that's used in the question. All right, in this case it's me. Can you bring me your plate? In English, if you were answering to somebody back, you would say, no, I can't bring you my plate. I can't bring my plate to you. So that indirect object pronoun would be te. Let's see if we can type that in there. No te lo puedo traer. ¿Quieres mostrarle la carta? Okay, look for the indirect object pronoun that's already used in the sentence. And it's saying, do you want to show the card or the letter to him or to her or to you? Le is referring to a usted, a él, or a ella. And even with that one, you don't have to change anything. It would just be say, sí, voy a mostrársela ahora. Because in English, if someone said, hey, do you want to show that to him now? And you say, yes, I'm going to show it to him now. The to him isn't changing. Les serviste la carne. Did you serve them the meat? No, I didn't serve them the meat. So here again, you'll use say, but it's referring to les, whoever that les happened to be referring to. Vas a leerle el menú. Are you going to read the menu to him? And in English, think about how you would answer. Are you going to read the menu to him? No, I'm not going to read it to him. To him is going to be this le, but we're going to have to use se since we're using it with lo. So se, no se lo voy a leer. Y luego, ¿me recomiendas la langosta? Do you recommend the lobster to me? Now, think about how that one would get answered in Spanish. If someone asked you, hey, would you recommend the lobster for me? Yeah, I would recommend it to you. So, te is the one that we're going to need here. You have to think about these just a little bit. Te, sí, te la recomiendo. ¿Cuándo vas a prepararnos la cena? And this is asking if you can find the indirect object pronoun that'll help you know how you're supposed to be using it. And the answer, nos, is the indirect object pronoun here. When are you going to prepare us the dinner? And when someone answers that, they're going to say, I'm going to prepare it for you in an hour. And the you here would be like you guys, so you would use say for that. If someone were to fill this one in with nos, I'm going to fix it for us in an hour, unless this is like a cook in a wealthy home and you're asking, hey, chef, when are you going to be preparing our dinner? And the chef doesn't eat with you. I would accept no as an answer as well on this one because, at least in my family, whoever cooks the food eats it with the family, with the people that it was prepared for. So with that one, nos would make sense as well. So hopefully these make sense to you. Again, practice, practice, practice is what's going to have it sink in where you own the information. And again, if you have any questions with these as you go through the practice in the book and on the Enlinea site, I will be more than happy to help you. And I hope you guys have a fabulous weekend, and I will see you again next Thursday at 10 o'clock.